Hey guys, I am a follower of Jesus Christ who is in recovery and struggles with the effects of abuse, control, mental health, specifically depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I have victory over anger. My name is Britany.
Hi, Britany.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pray us in, guys. Our Father, we love you. I am so grateful for this opportunity, Lord. So I ask that, Holy Spirit, you would fill this place and allow no one to leave the same way that they came, God. I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for each person here because we're all here for your divine purpose. And I pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
On April 28th, 1989, at 12:34 a.m. in the morning, I was born to a loving mama and a proud papa. I was the first of 3 baby girls. Thankfully, I would be the first. I know, right? I know, I had to. Thankfully, I would be the first to experience many things. Among them, acting, athletics, Girl Scouts, VFW Junior Girls, Ladies Auxiliary, and more. My mom was the master at keeping herself and her girls busy. For the most part, I have fond memories of the many activities that I was blessed to be a part of. Because in my adulthood, I have come to realize the power of community, which reveals one of my favorite principles. Principle number 4. Openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Happy are the pure in heart, Matthew 5:8. Before my parents' separation, at around age 7, life seemed to be full of a busy schedule and happy school memories, which were always full of friends. My dad was a firm disciplinarian and had an undeniable presence. He had us trained early. I could recognize the snap of his fingers from across the room, and if that right eyebrow was raised, we needed to drop everything we were doing. As a young girl, things like walking on eggshells was something I learned to do early on. My daddy was medically diagnosed but not treating bipolar disorder and ADHD. I remember at times not really knowing what to expect behaviorally from him. There surely wouldn't be any physical violence between my parents, but witnessing what I now understand to be emotional and psychological abuse was a regular part of my childhood. Something I will always remember about my daddy was that he always hustled for his family. After being honorably discharged from the Army, he worked as a security guard for many years. My mom is one of 10 children, so I truly believe she was the greatest hustler of the 2. On paper, we might have been considered low income at times, but I'm grateful I can say, when I look back on my childhood, we never knew it. I was blessed to have almost every toy a kid could want, and sometimes way too many. I remember finding great attachment to toys and material items, which is still something I must give effort to do less of in my adulthood. We always lived in cities with decent schools and safe neighborhoods. This was very important to my parents as they both were raised in Los Angeles. My mom and her siblings were bused out to schools in the Valley. She also attended Cal State Northridge and would later become a social worker for the Los Angeles County to solely support our family. Life was great. Life was pretty great through my 7-year-old eyes until one day it wasn't. Arriving home after being out with my mom, cousin, and 2 younger sisters, which were 2 years younger than the next, I followed behind my mom to greet my dad because I was eager to see him. Looking for him, my mom opened the nearest closed door, which surprised my daddy, causing him to drop something glass, which shattered immediately. Little did I know, this would be the first physically violent domestic dispute I'd witnessed between my parents. As it turns out, the glass my daddy dropped was a crack cocaine pipe, and while under the influence of drugs, he bit my mother with me and my sisters standing feet away. I'll never forget my mother's screams. The police were called, Daddy was arrested, and just like that, our family was never the same again. This event in my life made me feel many emotions, but among them was helpless and confused. Like many within my family, this event distorted my definition of abuse. I subconsciously processed boundaries for abuse in my life in an unhealthy way, meaning only when abuse escalates to the physical type should I leave a relationship, which I now know to be untrue. Domestic violence can happen in several forms: physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, financial, and spiritual. A true domestic violence survivor evolved because within what seemed like weeks, my mom packed up our lives and we moved. New city, new school, new friends, new activities, and a new home in West Covina, California, without mention of what happened. Reflecting on this time in my life, I know God was present because this home would be the only home I would know for the next decade at least. Again, on paper, it just didn't make sense. But God always made a way for his daughters. My mom did the Welfare to Work program, finished her bachelor's degree at Cal Poly Pomona, and provided a life for her daughters, just as if she were two people. She wasn't perfect, but again, I never knew I had any less than my friends. We traveled the nation with my travel softball team, which she managed, kicking butts and taking names. I found myself too busy to feel the lack of my dad's presence. Although I mentioned God's hand on my life during this time, a relationship with him was nearly non-existent. I was christened as an infant, but rarely attended church outside of Christmas and Easter. So I like to call us Creasters from time to time. This carried on until about age 15, when I dated a boy whose family members were heavy church attendees. His mom was an evangelist. In this small, non-denominational church, I raised my hand to accept Jesus Christ into my heart for the first time. I immediately joined youth group and the choir because I adore singing and dancing for Jesus, but just for him. So don't give a second thought to asking me to perform. My relationship with God was a slow-growing one for a few reasons, but mostly because of fear. Deep down, I've struggled to trust God with all the areas of my life. Parts of me didn't trust God because of what I had been through with my dad. Up until this point, I believed that I could somehow disappoint God and he would leave me. I heard verses like Hebrews 13:5 say, I will never leave you or forsake you. But I believe God would do that for others, not for me. Over the years, my father's addiction led his life, and he came and he went as my parents never divorced. He usually came around some major holidays where we would shower him with gifts, love, and welcome him home with open arms. During these times, I learned to numb my true feelings, say everything was fine, and smile through the pain, as my mom would say, kill him with kindness. However, by doing this, I learned to be unkind to myself and disregard my own feelings at all costs. It was unhealthy in many ways, and truly I believe this is where depression and anxiety found its home in my psyche. At times, I wish I could have been more like my middle sister, who wore her emotions on her sleeve. If she didn't like something, you knew right away. At age 16, my daddy visited our home and begged my mom to stay because he had nowhere else to go. He had nearly worn out his welcome, but she allowed him to stay on an air mattress for the night. He seemed to be sick because through the night he was sweating, shaking, and shivering, and these symptoms caused my concern. The following morning, I asked if he was all right, and in that moment, God blessed me with the gem I'll never forget. My dad said he would be fine, and before I knew it, he was sharing that he had given his life to Jesus Christ and despite all of the wrongs he had ever done, he knew his Father in heaven loved him. We connected over Jesus. However, the emotions ran from happy to devastated shortly thereafter when he explained why he was physically ill. He explained that he was withdrawing from a drug called crack cocaine, and because he had never lied to me before, he didn't plan to start that day. For the first time, I lost my kind and sweet nature and finally snapped. All of the bottled emotions, especially disgust and rage, surfaced. I yelled, screamed, cursed, and told him to leave. The process of stuffing my true emotions, only later to explode, began here. I didn't know this and many other things at the time, so elaborating on these feelings didn't happen. Being busy was my go-to coping mechanism for as long as I can remember. Around this time, I also began my journey with tattoos and piercings because this made me feel in control of my life and body. Among the things I didn't know at the time includes the fact that this would be the last time I would see my dad alive. My mom, sisters, and I were a tight-knit party of 4, so when we received the news of my father's passing, our personalities surfaced in their rawest form. It was March 16th, 2006, and our family was contacted by the Los Angeles coroner's office, where they routinely shared that my dad had died of a heart attack during a drug bust on Skid Row 8 days prior. Whether he was thought to have no family, no one to call family, or his identification became separated from him, it made his passing sting even more. My mom was supernaturally strong as she delivered the news to us after getting the call at work and attending our high school softball games. I was devastated, but was already codependent enough to run on foot after my middle sister, who ran out of the door, and our youngest sister collapsed where she stood. Community came through that day because our softball family was there within minutes to help us look for my sister. With my grandfather's help, we laid my daddy to rest and quickly got back to regularly scheduled programming. Keeping busy was something that felt unnatural because I wanted and needed time to grieve, but I couldn't. I felt out of control for so long, and this is where my character defects of codependency intensified because I learned to people please. Characteristically, I became whoever I hung around. I just wanted to be liked and praised, but would fall short of truly knowing myself for years to come because deep down, I never felt worthy enough to explore what I loved about myself. I graduated from Walnut High School and received a full athletic scholarship to a historically Black university in Georgia. Upon arrival, I almost immediately was stricken with uncontrollable symptoms like tearfulness, decreased energy, sleeping too much, difficulty concentrating, debilitating anxiety, and a loss of interest in activities, except for partying and drinking, just to name a few. Unbeknown to me and others in my life, these were all classic signs of major anxiety and depressive disorders. Losing my scholarship because of failing grades, I moved back home to California within 2 years. Lots of great things were at home, but I would be haunted by my educational performance for years to come. My middle sister was away in India on a mission trip, so I was happy I'd have my own room in my mom's new house. She's a homeowner now, and this has always been such an inspiration to me. But shortly after arriving home, my sister followed way earlier than expected. She was very ill with many medically unexplainable symptoms like uncontrollable hiccups and blood clotting, and for the following year and a half, doctors would never figure out what was truly wrong. By this point, I was dating seriously and busied myself with work, school, and travel. Simultaneously, despite her major health challenges, my sister considered pursuing her dream of obtaining an art degree and got into SCAD Atlanta. I also considered moving back to Atlanta, Georgia from time to time. So in the month of August, we relocated, but sadly, 5 days was all she would spend in our new apartment. She had several strokes, and just like that, things took a tragic, traumatic turn for the worst. At age 19, on November 27, 2011, my warrior jazz singer sister, artsy sister, passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. This was an extremely low point for me because this loss rocked me to my core. I instantly felt my relationship with God under siege. I thought, how could God allow this to happen to me and my family? As I greeted a family friend on the day of her passing, I murmured, I just don't understand. We just moved. We had so many plans. The family friend's cold response was, oh, our plans don't matter. Only God's plans matter. And just like that, I flipped off the switch that connected me with God. I wanted nothing to do with him. I was so angry with God. I figured if I referred to him as the universe, I could somehow take back some of the power and control in my life I had once given him, or so I thought. I hopped the next flight to ATL and coped with a hedonistic lifestyle, partying, and heavy drinking. My actions further fed my desire to control, and over the next few years, life seemed to become more and more unmanageable. 4 years was all my spirit could take running away from God, because I found my official rock bottom to be quite unpleasant. Now, I was a stay-at-home mom to 2 toddlers, severely depressed, in a narcissistically abusive relationship, and felt completely hopeless. Like many abusive relationships, one partner can feel isolated by their abuser from family and friends. I couldn't elaborate what was happening under the nearly $1 million roof I shared with the man that I thought I would marry, because things like financial withholding, belittling my every move, fits of rage and blame, withholding affection, and the silent treatment, just to name a few, seemed to be all too familiar. I felt like I had no one to turn to because there was only so much gossiping about my issues I could do. I ran out of people to call for advice, and I was full of rage, resentment, and anger that I knew I needed help with. Now, a mother to 2 busy boys, and if you haven't met them yet, just wait for it. And I suggest you hold on to something, because my boys, ages 3 and 5, are world changers in the making. You've been warned. I strolled my babies in, not knowing what I know about myself today. I simply knew I didn't want to be the woman that I had become anymore. When I walked through the doors of the church, I knew I was in the right place. Later, the Celebrate Recovery pastor lovingly said, if you have hurts, habits, and hang-ups, then Celebrate Recovery is the place for you. I literally speed walked over to him to get more information because I thought I was going to miss out. I had never heard of such a thing in a church. A church full of imperfect people? Where do they do that? So, in the month of January 2016, I began working the program. By March 21st, I was baptized for the first time, and presently I've been in recovery for 3 years. This brings me to principle 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Philippians 2:13. Out of all of the relationships I've been blessed to make an amends with, the best relationship was with myself. My understanding of my identity has changed in such a tremendous way. There is self-love I didn't think was achievable. This self-love exudes into almost every interaction and relationship I have, and it's a gift I intentionally share with the world daily. I simply adore people because Jesus loved me before, during, and after my most imperfect and turbulent seasons. He calls me beloved, delicate, his masterpiece, and victorious. And through working this program, I have finally been able to believe him. He has removed the filters of shame, resentment, insecurity, and selfishness that my emotions and actions used to run through time and time again. Not forcefully, but only because I asked him to. In such a way, like a father helps his daughter out of her old coat, I have to give effort to maneuver myself out of my old mindsets and habits to be able to wear my new coat, my Abba Daddy custom made for me. Therefore, I have been able to forgive others, but most importantly, myself. Additionally, God has snapped the chains of abuse in all forms in my life by helping me identify triggers and how to effectively communicate them to my loved ones, and so much more. Being ashamed of my battle with major depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress has gone because God has given me place after place to safely work on these areas of my life. I still have so much work to do, but I have made it to a place spiritually I never thought was possible for me. How, you ask? I hope you shouldn't have. Because I keep showing up. And sometimes this is right where God wants us to start. I mean, look at me, you guys. I'm up here on stage sharing my testimony when the enemy had me convinced that my story couldn't help anyone. By a show of hands, who heard something they could relate to?
Yeah.
Amazing, right? Even if just one person raised their hand, hashtag, my testimony matters. So does yours. Thank you. The world told this child who was raised by a single mom, had an addict as a father, who did poorly in school and struggled with her mental health, that I should have no hope, and so many other lies. The best decision I ever made was when I stopped believing that voice that said my circumstances, mistakes, and sins had to determine my tomorrow. Through working the 12 steps, I've learned to believe my Abba Father's voice tell me I'm a woman of excellence. I feel it's best explained by Tony Evans. Excellence is not concerned with how you compare to others. Excellence is concerned with how you compare to the potential of who you are supposed to be. In other words, excellence has to do with God's destiny for you. Are you progressively pressing forward towards what he has for you? End quote. To the newcomer, I simply adore you.
Yeah.
And don't get all weird. I'm just super glad you're here. You are courageous and victorious just because you showed up. God is doing his happy dance for you. Okay? So whatever that looks like, whether it's the dab or the jitterbug, and don't judge me, I had to Google jitterbug because I don't know. But either way, he adores you and he's pumped you're here. Seriously, your testimony matters. I literally started coming here because I couldn't stand being the same person anymore. And the community here brought me back. There will never be another forever family like the one you'll find here. Currently, God is calling me to move mountains in Las Vegas, and we'll be moving the 1st of March. I know. I knew that was going to happen. I'm you're like, okay. Sorry. I plan to take my leadership skills and passion for mental health and cultural communities within Celebrate Recovery along with me. This ministry has and will continue to help me live out my life verse in more ways than one, and I couldn't ask for anything more in a forever family. Proverbs 31:29-30 says, "Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." Thank you for letting me share.